The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, Week 4 DraftKings picks and preview. Before we get into the entire Sunday slate only, by the way, no Thursday, no Monday, no Sunday nighter, the main Millionaire Maker DraftKings slate, I do want to let everyone know, give the episode a like, leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section, and tell me, if you're playing one team in a single entry contest, which quarterback are you playing on your roster? I'm curious to know. It's useful information for everybody. So yeah, the like, the handle, and the quarterback, boom, you're in a draw for $20 DK. On last week's ranking show, I had mentioned, I don't like to bring my personal life into this too often, but I asked people to send some positive vibes my way, or if you're the praying type, offer up a prayer, and a lot of people really responded. I really do appreciate that. So thank you to everyone. Things are looking a little bit better, and that's really great news. So thank you all so much for that. Also, yesterday's ranking show with Jake and Garion, top-notch stuff, fun show. Go check that out as well. Plus, there's giveaways at the beginning of that as well. So give that a like, leave your DraftKings handle, and find out by clicking on it what the actual contest is. Today on the show from Awesemo.com, it is Ben Rasa to break down each position. And you might, if you're new to Ben or anything like that, just know, like we had Davis and Siege on last week, Ben has more fire than those two guys combined, don't you?
Oh, yeah. It's usually in the golf realm, but, this is the quote-unquote off-season transition to football. So, yeah, I'm excited. NFL is always a great time.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to have the same sort of hot takes as Siege and Davis. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah, I don't know if I can get that hot. I'll do my best to try to keep that going, keep the edge, but we'll see what happens.
Well, just wait until we talk about Josh Allen. I assume you're going to be all in on him.
That's right. I can make the Bills. If Leone was here, I would have a word with him. I hope he's on the bandwagon now.
Listen, behind the camera, Paul Shagg is sitting there, and he's like looking up Josh Allen jerseys as we speak.
Smart man. He knows.
You were like the one guy who came on the show before the season and said you like Josh Allen.
Yeah, I really do. And it was nice to see him. Not that I wouldn't have touched the Bills probably with the points, but it was good to see that.
All right, so you can find all the football coverage over at Awesemo.com. The promo code PME, just PME, works over at Awesemo.com if you want to get yourself a little taste of what's going on over there, so go check that out. So before we get into it, you were just telling me off air, weeks 1 and 2, not so hot. And special shout out to Siege last week. Siege takes a bunch of heat, especially now that he's fighting DC again. So I want to get those two on at some point. His two big talked up low end plays last week. Robert Woods at the mid tier, Calvin Ridley at the bottom tier. So that worked out well for him.
Yeah, that'll work. Yeah, Robert Woods was helpful for me. Not having Calvin Ridley was not helpful. That would get it done last week for sure.
So talk me through your first 2 weeks and how week 3 was a bit of a rebound.
Yeah, first 2 weeks were ugly. Mahomes was shorted both weeks. That honestly wasn't even the biggest problem. I felt like I had the right quarterbacks. I couldn't connect, whether it was Ryan to Julio, Cam to McCaffrey, guys just not finding the end zone. The defenses weren't great, just pretty much sloppy. Some mistakes. I didn't think things broke my way either. Last week, rebounded. It's helpful when the Falcons Saints goes into overtime. Avoided some of the quote unquote landmines, Lat Murray and the gang, Ebron, not too heavy. I did have him in certain spots, but overall it was a nice bounce back week. It's always good to get one somewhat early because I don't know about you, but when I transition from sports, sometimes it feels like I'm like, oh my God, I'm never going to win an NFL. Like I can only do golf now. You feel kind of rusty, but you get back into the flow.
Yeah, week 3 was by far my best week of the season, but I'm not playing the same volume that you're playing and the same stakes that you're playing either.
Yeah, it's all relative. It's just, it was good to finally see it click. I felt like, especially week 2, I was better, but the results weren't. And then, things broke. Kamara obviously was quite important. Tyler Boyd was good. Was happy with the player pool. And I think it goes back to getting the games right. Like I was higher. I dodged the Cowboys defense was really popular. I was higher on the Seahawks at home, just winning that game. I like the Cardinals to put up more of a battle, I think, than most. I was on their defense. Little things like that made the difference.
All right, so let's get into the positions. We'll start at running back, and you mentioned the name. Alvin Kamara is at the very top, once again, at the Giants. 3-point spread in that game, too, which is kind of crazy. I mean, it seems kind of wonky to me, and I don't really know what to make of it, but he's exponentially more, well, not exponentially more, he's $1,300 more than Melvin Gordon is on this slate. Then you have Saquon Barkley, Zeke Elliott, Leonard Fournette, presumably returning from injury. And then not many in the $6,000 area because we lose McCaffrey on this slate and we lose Chris Thompson and AP on this slate, who'd probably be right around $6,000. So you have Howard, David Johnson, Gio Bernard, and Devonta Freeman. If Joe Mixon doesn't play, I don't see how you can really avoid Gio Bernard in this spot against the Falcons.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's been a common theme for me, not week one because they played in the first game, but I attacked McCaffrey in week two. Then, the Deion Jones thing for Atlanta, losing him, I think, opens up these running backs. It doesn't help the Falcons that they're playing probably some of the best pass catchers with McCaffrey and then Kamara, but Gio Bernard fits that role. That defense is getting more banged. They're losing guys left and right. So 6,300. I know he's going to be popular, but I'm with you. I'm buying.
Like, is there anyone you can think of who's better in that $6,000 area? Like you confess you've been using David Johnson each of the 3 weeks, and you're going to go back to him again.
Yeah, I am. I mean, I don't understand how they don't understand that they need to get him the ball in space. They did it a little. He scored. I thought that was going to lead to more things. It didn't. We'll see. Rosen coming in is somewhat of a wild card. You would think that would make them lean on him. I do prefer getting Seattle. They're at home at least. Defense isn't quite what it was on the road or just in general at this point. So I don't mind going back to him. Bernard's definitely the safer play, probably the more optimal play. But if it looks like ownership's concentrated there, I definitely will have some David Johnson.
So if we go to the top, you have Kamara, you have Gordon, you have Barkley, all above $8,000. Clearly, Kamara is the best play, but he's more expensive than everyone else. I kind of like Melvin Gordon in this spot against this 49ers team, which God knows what they're going to look like with CJ Guilty Beathard at quarterback and potentially signing like Tom Savage, the Macho King. When we get a return of him and he can suffer a concussion and then he'll be out again because that's always what happens to Tom Savage. But I understand the fact that, the split with Eckler is not great, but sometimes they're both on the field. They're both involved in the passing game. But I do feel like he has a lockdown on these goal line touches. And if that's the case, like San Francisco's defense is no special unit by any means.
I'm with you. Eckler, he gets involved, but it's more so in games like we saw last week. And this is a heavy spread. Chargers at home. You never know. I mean, I don't think anyone could say there's locks anymore after the Vikings fiasco, but it would seem like the Chargers will handle this game. Gordon should be getting the touches. And I'm with you in the red zone with the carries. He seems like the guy that they want to get. I wouldn't be stunned to see him find the end zone a couple times. Probably if I'm paying up, that's where I want to go.
So you wouldn't pay all the way up for Kamara, you don't think? Or is it or do you have a choice this week? Like if you want to pay up to the very top, do you take Michael Thomas, who's probably going to get janked by the Giants, although I'm not too concerned about that. Sealy was concerned minimally about that on the ranking show. Like you would prefer Gordon over Barkley though?
I would, yeah. I don't know really what to make of Saquon. I know that line is bad. I'm hoping that maybe they can give Eli some time and he can go downfield a little because I will get to Odell. I get it. I don't have any problem with Barkley. Kamara, you said it. He's a great play. It's just $1,300 more is tricky. I think he might revert back to less volume. I mean, last week the volume was in a rare air for him. Usually he just somehow gets there on 15 touches, and that's why I come in underweight most of the time. So we'll see there. But Melvin Gordon just seems, I think the price is fair and a spot that I still like.
So with Barkley being right there, I guess you can look at this one of two ways. If this does become the shootout that a lot of people expect and the Giants are playing just catch up the entire time, I mean, that could translate. And we saw a game where Barkley ended up with 15 catches or 16 catches, whatever the hell it was. Like, it seems like that could be on the table for him this week. And if that's the case, you're going to want to have him. I just don't know if that completely filters itself out.
Yeah, I mean, that was the Dallas game. It was tilting to see because I really didn't love it. And it's just, it adds up so fast on DraftKings, the full point PPR. You can have an inefficient game, but if you catch 10 balls for 45 yards, I mean, that adds up a lot. So I get the logic there. I mean, the spread is somewhat indicative that the Giants are going to hang around. They are home. Saints defense, it looks bad. They're losing guys. I still think I do lean to Melvin Gordon just because the game script sets up the red zone potential, the touchdown equity. And he's involved in the passing game as well. But I do see the appeal of going to Barkley if you wanted to change.
So the two right below that, Zeke and Fournette. Zeke gets the Lions at home, a defense which you can run on. That's very possible. And he's becoming more and more involved in the passing game. He's not doing a ton with it as of yet, but it could work. If he didn't step out of bounds last week, he would have had a receiving touchdown, although he stepped out of bounds, so it wasn't a touchdown. Fournette's a really interesting one to me because I really like this matchup with him against the Jets. We just saw Cleveland run all over them with Carlos Hyde. And if he truly is healthy, he's already practicing on Wednesday, that no one's going to own him. And maybe that's a good call. But like if you're going to take a low-owned David Johnson where he's at in this matchup against Seattle, I think from just pure volume, if Fournette's going to play, I think he's the one who ends up with more touches.
Yeah, I think that, he's the guy. If you're looking for a real low-owned dude, I think that's your best bet. I still worry a little. Jacksonville's hard to figure out. He's not the best in the passing game. David Johnson should be more dynamic. They just, for some reason, don't give him the volume. For me, it is a situation where I'll probably bump down. We talked about Gio and David Johnson, or I'll find the extra salary and go get Gordon or Zeke. I do like Zeke this week. They're going to lean on him. He is more involved in the passing game. He could have had, you talked about it, could have had a touchdown. He had a fumble in the passing game. It's just, I think they keep including him more and more. Home to the Lions, a pretty juicy matchup.
So, any interest in Jordan Howard right there? It just doesn't, although the Tampa defense is brutal, I don't know if I would want to play him in his potential variable volume, depending on how much Cohen gets in and how this game flow goes. And I don't love the Chicago offense to begin with. So I just think he's a fine play, but not at that price compared to the other guys that are around. Like Gio's a way better play.
Yeah, I have no problem with Howard, but it's a situation where I have a finite amount of teams and there's just other guys that I feel more comfortable with. I think he has a fine game, but Chicago's a weird offense. There's always the Cohen thing. Not a team I'm overly. The defense is. We'll get to the defense. That's the spot if I go to the Bears that I'll probably be looking at.
So we like Gio Bernard at his price point. The next running back sort of in play after that, below $6,000, is Tevin Coleman in that same matchup. Could you see a situation where you use Gio and Coleman as your two running backs? Because I can envision that.
Yeah, if I pay down, it is a lot because this is a week I think I am going to primarily spend up. We mentioned a lot of guys up there. But if you're looking for somewhat cheap, I didn't see that much. And Coleman's a guy, he is involved, certainly. And he's taking advantage of Freeman being out. Home against the Bengals doesn't seem overly opposing. I still think that I want to try to get up. And I know it's going to be tough, but have Gio as my second running back.
Really? So, I guess you could play pay up. It'd be tough to squeeze those two and someone in the upper echelon as well. So if we go below Coleman, I like Coleman for the record. I can see myself playing Gio and Coleman in some lineups depending on what I want to do at receiver or potentially even tight end. But below that, we have Ajayi's there. We're not sure whether he's going to be back or not. Shady, we're not sure whether he's going to be back or not. People are talking up Matt Breida because Beathard continuously throws to running backs. They think he might pile up a ton of receptions. That could be the case, but I'm just not convinced on that volume that he's going to end up seeing. If he's only going to get 8 to 12 max touches on the ground, he's going to really need to do a lot in the receiving game or continue this ludicrous efficiency that he's seen so far, which really hasn't come along with scores from in close. He's going to have to break a 60-yarder. And that's kind of tough to bank on, and especially for the price point that he's at right now. So if we go below, White's there, Drake's there in a rebound week. I guess the guy that I'm really eyeing is Carlos Hyde because I don't think anyone's going to use him. And that's a nice matchup.
Oh, the Brownies. He played well on Thursday. I think he's fine, I want to say, but at the same time, I think there's a pretty big gap between these guys and the Bernard level. I know you're getting a discount, but the floors on some of these, the game scripts, the question marks, I think they come into play here. I don't feel super comfortable with this range. I'm off Breida. I'm with you. If he was 4,500, I could see that logic, but 5,800 is a pretty big tag to be relying on a handful of touches. And we're not sure what that offense is going to look like. They could really struggle.
So who is it from the cheap running back perspective that you do like this week?
I don't really like much, to be honest. I mean, Carson's getting some work in Seattle. I don't love it. Dion Lewis, I think you could be a little sneaky there. They're at home. Not a great matchup with the Eagles, of course. But other than that, I know this is the spot where I think you're sacrificing a decent amount by paying down at running back. My game plan, if now I haven't built, of course, it's pretty early in the week, but my game plan right now is to find the salary to pay up to some guys that I really like.
I guess if you were going to pay down, maybe take a look at the Jets running backs. Both Powell and Crowell are like $38 and $3,700. So I guess if this gets into a situation where it's a negative game script, that you would think that would mean more Bilal Powell, but I'm not even entirely convinced that's going to be the case.
I noticed their salaries caught my eye. I don't love the matchup, obviously, at Jacksonville, but that's the situation. Kind of, I was just talking about Breida with Bilal Powell. You can get there just by pure dump downs. When you're 3,800, if you catch 6 balls, you're probably not going to kill anyone. So, if I'm really in a jam, maybe I look there. But again, it's pretty tough sledding when you look to the cheapies this week.
Well, a lot of people are like big upping Kerryon Johnson after watching him in the Sunday night game and kind of dismantling the Patriots a little bit. I'm going to be off that, though. I didn't like the fact that he's still splitting with Blunt almost just directly even down the board in terms of snap share, in terms of touches. Plus, Theo Riddick's involved in that game. Now they're on the road in Dallas. I know there's no Sean Lee, but Dallas's defense isn't like bad. It's like okay. So it's not just going to be a sieve where the Lions are probably going to be able to run the ball 40 times and be super effective doing it.
I like Kerryon Johnson in life. I think he's a better player than most, but the Lions just don't give him. Maybe he starts to see more volume and a workload that's more indicative of like a running back one, but there's just too many bodies in that backfield. There's game script issues. You mentioned Riddick, you mentioned Blunt. I don't feel comfortable really going there with what we know.
So I guess the other guys from like the sub 4K range, if you just want catches, Nyheim Hines played 71% of the Colts snaps. If Marlon Mack sits again, with the pass rush that Houston can bring, there might just be a lot of dump-offs. A lot has been made of Andrew Luck so far this season just becoming like Charlie Checkdown. If that's going to be the case, having your pass-catching running back on the field at the same time. Like if all you're trying to do from down in this range, because there's not one guy we can kind of agree on that's going to have a good game. So if you're just purely speculating, then I think you might take the one who could have like 6-7 catch upside and just hope that translates into something.
Yeah, I mean, when you're down here, it's tough to rely on a touchdown. And if you're not relying on a touchdown, none of these guys get enough carries to really get you there. So you have to roll with maybe some of the backs that have a negative game script and will be passing and can rack up the catches. Because that's how we even saw Ebron last week. He did absolutely nothing. And then on that stupid last drive, he caught a handful, and it really raises the floor. It can add up fast. So Hines, Powell, I think that's probably your best bet. I don't know why Duke Johnson should be in that role, but he's really not seeing much. So I'm with you. I think if I do go down here, it'll be that type of back.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with Carlos Hyde. He's seen 20-plus K. Like the Browns have played in 3 really competitive games that have been close, that they can continue to run the ball for all 4 quarters. Carlos Hyde has seen over 20 carries in 2 of the 3 games. He's scored 4 touchdowns. There's just not enough left to go around for Duke Johnson.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's true. The Browns, I said it 16 consecutive weeks last year that they were going to win, and I was wrong every time. Now they actually look somewhat competitive.
Do you play against expectations and go with Sony Michel, considering that Rex Burkhead probably is not going to play?
I mean, this has happened so many times before where the Patriots are dead and buried, and then they just smoke the Dolphins and get moving. I don't know. That's such a tough bet. I mean, James White is the guy that always has somewhat of a secure role. It's not always with carries, but at least he's involved. He finds the end zone. I don't think I want to mess around there. I get the logic if Burkhead doesn't play, but he's also not he's 4,500, which makes a slight difference. I think if I was really in a jam there, I would lean to Dion Lewis.
I think like if you're in that $4,000 range and all you really want is safety, that Marshawn Lynch kind of provides that. that going up against Cleveland, it's a tougher matchup, but they are home favorites. He's scored in every game so far. Like, the script just seems to be, hey, we're going to try to do as little as possible. Give Marshawn the ball, and if we get in close, let's just hand it off to Marshawn Lynch. He can score touchdowns. That I don't know how high his ceiling is, but I feel like his floor is pretty decent. I don't love the price, but I don't love a lot of the options down here.
Yeah, it's slim pickings.
Like realistically, what's the difference, do you think, between like Lynch and Chris Carson?
No, not much. I don't really like either of them. But the thing about Lynch that always freaks me out, and this is why he doesn't have a high ceiling, but he finds the end zone, of course. It's just when they get behind and they're just awful. I know they're playing Cleveland at home, so they should find a way to stay in this. But, Jalen Richard just magically in those games gets 10 receptions. Lynch is not an asset at all in the passing game. If they can get the right game script, he's probably a pretty nice buy at 4,800 just because they do look to him. He finds the end zone. The volume will be there. It's just you really need them to play well.
You do. Well, what about Richard then? Like, do you try to predict how you think this game is going to unfold and say, hey, this is going to be a game where the Browns get up. Baker Mayfield's excellent. They're going to get up by a bunch in this game. And all of a sudden, Jalen Richard's the guy with 10 catches.
Yeah, I tried that in the wrong week. He did that in weeks 1 and 3. I tried that in week 2, and he was non-existent. If you're making a bunch of teams, maybe you stack one up with like Baker, Landry, saying, another guy, and then run it back with Richard, saying Baker goes nuts, and then the Raiders are playing catch up. I wouldn't hate that, but I think it's pretty risky all in all.
Is there enough work in the Green Bay backfield that one guy can emerge that you would play, or is that just a stay away forever until they actually establish someone who can get things done on a consistent basis?
I like that. Stay away forever. Let's just leave it at that. Yeah, I have no interest in trying to break down that. They're another one. Great, even though who knows about these Bills, but you would assume that Green Bay is leading, and they do lean on that running game late, but it's very tough to figure out.
All right, last one. I kind of brought up Shady a little bit. We're still not certain he's going to play. If he sits, Chris Ivory is $4,600. Is he just the lock it in play if Shady sits?
He's not a lock it in for me. He would vault to probably my favorite guy, sub 5. It's very hard to really know what happened last week, where everything seems to click. For the offense, obviously the Bills' defense was playing good. I don't see, we're not going to see that again, but we talked about all these guys are littered with question marks. He's going to have the lion's share there. They don't have much behind him, so he will be on the field he played, I think it was like 80-something% of snaps. It was a lot. So I don't mind going there. He'd probably be one of my favorite cheapies, but I still am sticking to I would prefer to pay up. I think I can make that work.
The Packers' rush defense is 29th through 3 weeks per DVOA. Does that give you any inclination that this could be a week to play Shady, or is he just he's sort of like the Green Bay backfield, just stay away?
I love playing that guy. I always get into trouble. I probably will stay away, to be honest. A lot of unknowns. If Ivory takes some of those, we'll see if he's limited if McCoy does play. It's probably just to stay away, to be honest.
Let's move to wide receivers. Michael Thomas comes in at the top. Janoris Jenkins likely to cover him and his $9,100 price tag. I think that the Saints will just give him enough volume, move him around enough that's really not going to make that big of a difference. But if that keeps you off of him, that keeps you off of him. But if this is a week where we're paying up at running back, does that mean we have to pay down at receiver?
I probably won't get to Michael Thomas on those teams where I pay up at running back. He's similar to Kamara for me. I get it. If I had the money, I would play him, but I think there's better options or similar options with a slight discount. So
that entire $7,000 level up to Michael Thomas, Beckham is second at $8,700 against this awful Saints defense. Then you got Hopkins, Keenan, Julio, Evans, Adams, AJ Green, who may or may not play, Jarvis Landry, and then T.Y. Hilton at $7,000. Is it Beckham of those guys that you like the best?
I think so. Just feel, the problem with the Giants, the line is bad. Eli, that's why we see Barkley getting a lot of those receptions. If they can hold up here, they're at home. Odell should really have a game. He hasn't been bad by any stretch, but he hasn't had a nuclear one either. I'll try to get up there where I can. All these guys are really talented. Who knows with Julio what the deal is? I don't know if this Ridley situation is taking some of those targets, why they don't. Sarkisian just doesn't seem to want to look to him in the red zone. And then the last guy you mentioned, T.Y. Hilton at home. Those are all guys that I'll certainly look to depending on how much salary I have left.
Do you think that people are going to get off the Tampa offense? We don't know who the starter is yet. We're presuming it's the Fitzmagic because all the guy does is check for 400 yards. And they're going to see that Chicago's coming in. Chicago slows down the pace of play. They can really get to the quarterback no problem, as we've seen with Khalil Mack through 3 games, better than the Raiders' entire defense. But
right.
Is that a spot to go back to, like Fitz, Evans, Godwin, Djax, like those guys again?
Oof. I don't think the Bears defense at home. I know that's what most people are going to be seeing and targeting, but I kind of am with them. I prefer the Bears side of that matchup. It's a tricky spot for Mike Evans. I think it'll be Fitzpatrick as well. They have the bye coming up, then maybe they make the move to Winston, but I think for me, I'm not going to end up going there. It's not the right spot.
The $6,000 level, Will Fuller is in there, as is Golden Tate, Kenny Golladay, Josh Gordon, who may or may not play, Allen Robinson, who I actually kind of like at $5,900, and then like Chris Hogan, Kenny Stills, Nelson Aguilar. There could be a return of Alshon Jeffrey. We're probably not going to know that until Sunday, or at least on Friday if he practices, we'll have a better sense. So I recommend that everyone tune in to the Friday show I do with Jeff Ulrich, where we update a lot of the injury reports and talk about who's going to be the most popular at the position. You mentioned T.Y. Hilton. Will Fuller's in that game. Do you think the Colts-Texans game is a game to stack that people might be off of?
In terms of games that aren't on the main radar, I think it is. It's in the dome. I could see it being up and down. Fuller, I really don't understand. He's due for like multiple years of regression because he just doesn't do anything, and then he finds the end zone, it seems like, every time. But yeah, I like that game. I like T.Y. Hilton. Obviously, Hopkins is always in play. It's going to be more, can I find, when you stack a game, you want to find some of the pieces in the lower range, and that could be tricky. We'll talk about Ebron, of course, but there's no real, like Ryan Grant. It's not a great situation for the Colts besides Hilton.
I really like Colts defense this week, but we'll get to that later on. People who've been watching this show for the past 2 days know I like the Colts defense. And when we see the price point, you'll see why they really make a lot of sense, I think, for building some lineups this week. They're a team that can give up a lot of points, yet still score in terms of fantasy, which is something that you always like to see. Will Fuller, though, I always find, doesn't matter what Will Fuller's price is. It's either you play, he's kind of like Tyreek Hill. Either you play him or you don't play him.
Absolutely. Me and Andrew talk about that on our show all the time, that Marquise Goodwin is another one. The price is almost irrelevant because they're either going to bust horribly and you're going to be in trouble no matter what they are, or they get there. And it's just the way they are. Most likely Fuller, if he gets there, it's because he caught a 70-yard touchdown. And we've seen Tyreek Hill. He can kind of outscore any tag. It's just a risk reward based on ownership and based on kind of the rest of your team.
So if we look at this entire $5,000 level, I mentioned Chris Hogan's name, and let's say Josh Gordon's on the field. Everyone's like in season-long fantasy, and sometimes this is a great way to track how ownership is going to go week to week on DraftKings, that people are dropping Chris Hogan because, I hate Chris Hogan. He's the worst. The Patriots suck, da-da-da-da-da. This is going to be a week where Chris Hogan's going to come in at like 1% ownership. Doesn't this just seem like a classic Patriots rebound? Chris Hogan smashes everyone.
Yes, it does. I'm with you on Allen Robinson. I get that. I like that. But Chris Hogan, if he's going to be non-existently owned, I'll look there. I don't know what they do with Josh Gordon. I don't think he'll be much of a factor. But even if he keeps them more honest, they're probably going to be primarily focused on stopping Gronk, which I totally get. Chris Hogan has the upside still. And yes, the floor hasn't been great. Everything's looked bad for them. But at home, I'm not super sold on this Dolphins team in general. I just feel like we've seen this before. I wouldn't be stunned at all if the Patriots rebound in a big way and he's involved.
Lions receivers. Golladay and Tate are both in the 6,000s. Marv is in the bottom $5,000 area. Do any of them draw your interest?
It was hard enough with two of these dudes. Now this other guy, like I used to have to, Tate versus Marvin. I want to say Tate, probably my favorite, but it's really tough. I feel like you got to get it right twice. I talk about that in a lot of different scenarios, but it's like the Lions have to attack through the air, and then even if they do, you have to pick the right one. That's always a tricky situation.
So Godwin or Djax, they on the radar, or are you just going to avoid the passing game for the Bucs completely?
Not really on the radar, to be honest. I'd probably rather take a flyer with like Amari Cooper over Djax.
I don't want to do Amari Cooper. I think just Denzel Ward eats his lunch in this game, and
That's probably true.
And I really honestly think you might miss the 3 200-yard games during the season, but I think you just overall for positive EV perspective, just don't play Amari Cooper. Play him on short slates, like in showdown contests. That's probably the best way to utilize Amari Cooper.
Yeah, I mean, last year he was useless, and then on a Thursday, I remember that distinctly. He had like 4 touchdowns in the first quarter. It felt like he was just rolling. Life EV certainly is best to fade him. It's not a guy that I'm overly sold on, but I just think the Bucs, I don't know. This is a tough one. Chicago's defense is seriously no joke.
Lockett at 51, who's scored in every game so far?
Yeah, that's the other few and far between things that have done good. I've been on him. He's another one, kind of risky just because he's a burner and he's sort of reliant on those long balls. But with no Baldwin, Russ looks to him, and they've had a brutal stretch. That's why I liked them last week. You know, they start off with 2 real tough defenses, Broncos, Bears. This is not, the Cardinals D is not exactly a juggernaut. I do think they're all right, but yeah, 5,100, sign me up.
Okay, so the 2 guys that I was going to kind of go to here, Keelan Cole and Corey Davis, in that range where I think people are going to see that price tag on Keelan Cole and say, no thanks for me. I'll just find better options lower. And Corey Davis, people are just fed up with him almost in the same way that they are with Chris Hogan. And I get it. He's been awful. But if he's going to generate a high market share, Mariota is back, clearly not to full health, but healthier than he was 2 weeks ago and then last week, that maybe he can get some semblance of that upside that we all thought that he could have coming into the season. And now you get him the week before he goes. If he goes off, everyone's going to love Corey Davis because that's just the way this works. He seems like a guy you'd want to be a week early on.
Yeah, he's one of those guys, and I tend to be this way. I try to be a week early, and a lot of times that leads to playing a guy who sees 7 targets, catches 2 balls for 24 yards, and he busts. I tried to do that with Kenyon Drake last week. It was wildly unsuccessful. But I'm with you. I think, I mentioned Deion. I don't mind attacking the Titans a little. Certainly not a team I'm looking to stack up. But if they're behind, it's all the more reason that they're going to have to throw. Corey Davis seems to have, similar to Cole in the sense that it's crowded, but at the same time, they seem to be the guy. So the target should be there, and the price isn't terrible with ownership. That's everyone. You're right. Everyone is kind of soured on him. That's the best time to jump on.
Because I think that everyone in this area is just going to turn to Sterling Shepard. He's getting a lot of buzz early on in the week. We've already seen that the Saints are down DBs at this point. They have Marshawn Lattimore, and that is now it. Their defense wasn't good to begin with. No Evan Ingram. That's going to funnel more targets towards Sterling Shepard. We saw that at the end of the Texans game last week. He's a very reasonable price. Is he good chalk or bad chalk?
I don't want to say he's bad chalk because I get it, and I'm going to play some, but I totally see the appeal of trying to bump up a little. Everyone, I was talking about, I like those running backs. I like Odell. He's a perfect piece to use in a stack because he's not super expensive. That's going to add to the appeal. A lot of people will probably pair up, Eli and him and run it back with a Kamara or Michael Thomas. I may do that here and there, but all in all, I don't think I'm going to let that guy define my week. Right now, my plan is maybe I take 20-ish%, have them in certain spots, use them maybe in cash, and just get out of there. I'm not going to overload myself. No reason for me to full fade or anything like that. I don't think it's that kind of play because I think the floor is good. But 4,900, no Ingram. It seems pretty promising.
And people are going to just look on the DraftKings system and see that juicy green 32nd and next to opponent rank and kind of go with that. I think the one thing that will save his ownership from getting out of control are all the people that will want to play Calvin Ridley at exactly the same price.
That's a guy I'm not messing around with. I'm still waiting and seeing. I think what we saw, we've seen the range, obviously. He did nothing in week 1, and he's not eclipsing that game. Where he truly falls remains to be seen. So that's a spot where I'm way more apt to completely full fade, not go there. Maybe if I make a Falcon stack or something, I throw him in, but he's a guy that I think you could get pretty good leverage if you take a more radical approach to him.
So a lot of people are going to go to Geronimo Allison in this range too, just because he caught a touchdown last week, and everyone who watched the Skins and the Packers game, that Randall Cobb just kept dropping passes all over the field. And maybe in this game script, maybe he doesn't see above double-digit targets again. But 2 out of 3 weeks, Cobb has been above double-digit targets, including 11 last week, 2 really bad drops, only ended up with 4 receptions. People have soured on him. I feel like this $5,000 range at receiver, maybe it's not the best spot to target because maybe you want to go down low, save that money, and pay up at running back. But it really does seem like a dead range, and it does feel like there is a lot of opportunity here. And the best part is all these guys are going to come in so lowly owned that you don't need to have much of them if you're playing like 10, 20 lineups.
Yeah, I see the appeal there too. And that's an important distinction. You can take, say you're playing 20 lineups, you can make put them on 3 out of 20, get 15%, and 2x, 3x the field on some of these guys. So it doesn't take a huge stance to get multiple of them. Some are not going to play well, but one or two may have a big game. Cobb's another one. I know I'm kind of peppering this range with Lockett. I don't mind that. Randall Cobb's a guy I also biasly, I tend to get him right. There's certain guys like that, kind of like Russell Henley in the golf world. But the targets are there. I think we see a pretty reasonable script for him in the sense that the opportunities will be there. The ownership is souring. No problem with taking an overweight stance.
Do you think that Patrick Peterson goes on Lockett or Brandon Marshall?
I would think that it would be Lockett.
So would that sour you to Lockett a little bit? And maybe, just maybe, get Jaron Brown in a revenge situation?
Jaron Brown, I used him on the late slate the other day. That's pretty. Where is he? Where's his salary?
Jaron Brown is 3,700. Yeah, he's 3,700. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, again, and it's similar basically to every position outside of tight end. When you get in this range, you're just looking for something. And that guy, he's seeing some snaps. I've seen a little of their game plan. It looks like he'll be somewhat involved. I still like Lockett. I know Patrick Peterson's a damn good player, and if he does go there, it's not the best circumstance. But Jerome Brown's interesting. Christian Kirk is interesting on the other side. Didn't play that many snaps, saw a lot of targets, and I know we have Rosen coming in, so I don't know. That's a mystery in itself. I don't know exactly what he'll do with that, but I think there's a couple options at the sub 4K range.
Yeah, I think right around that level, like Quincy and Enunwa at $4,300, even against Jacksonville, could see such a. I think I'd be willing to gamble on his target share being like 50% rather than 0%, depending on where he's matched up. If he just runs short routes, it seems like an easy pass for Darnold to make, and they clearly have a connection. Maybe Jacksonville will be smart, scheme that out of it, and just watch what Darnold does and probably like implode on the field. But it seems super cheap for him, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, obviously, DraftKings is pricing down, this matchup with Jacksonville. And you mentioned it. Darnold, he likes him. The routes that he's running are clearly the optimal ones in terms of what they want to do. I do worry that Jacksonville presses up and forces him to go over the top. If you really wanted to roll the dice, maybe you say like, hey, Robbie Anderson, if he can get over top of them, it's scary. I mean, the corners over there are good, and that's not Darnold's best feature. But I don't know. It kind of smells like a trap with just that price caught my eye as well. I'm just interested to see how Jacksonville's defense really schemes for that.
Yeah, I'll end up using little Quincy and go on my way. There's so little he has to do to return value at that price based on what he's done so far this season. Like he's averaging 4x that price.
I mean, if he's going to continuously see close to double-digit targets in each game, when you're 4,300, it's hard not to get there. If he's that focal point, it's just a matter of, does Jacksonville just say, hey, we're going to allocate a little extra to him, force them to roll to Pryor, to Anderson, to Kearse, to anybody else? That would be a problem, obviously. At 4,300, you still do have to do something. And, the end zone's going to be probably pretty difficult.
So Jaron Brown and Chris Kirk are two like flyers from down there. I think if I'm going to take GPP bombs from like $4,500 and down, Ted Ginn is going to be one of them. I think that's a cheap way to get exposure to that game just for big plays. And the other one, another like bad defense, big play guy with Jesus Christ. Now I'm slipping on his name. Anthony Miller, hurt. Taylor Gabriel could get behind that defense.
That's what happens when you mention Ted Ginn. It just Men in Black and
it zaps my mind.
Yeah, that's right. That's what he does. Yeah, Anthony Miller being out is interesting. That's part of the reason. I mean, it's not like they weren't giving Robinson enough work as it is, but that's not going to change anytime soon. And I have no problem. I think that's a pretty interesting spot. Gabriel's a guy we saw. I mean, the Falcons were pretty creative getting him involved here and there. I think the Bears can do some of that. 3,900, not going to be popular. And he's seen, he hasn't been terrible so far this year. It's not like we're bringing him in cold. So these are the kind of guys that I'm probably going to be forced to have, not all of them together, but here and there, just to make room for those elite running backs.
Over under 15% exposure to Kelvin Benjamin for you.
Ooh, oh boy. I want to say push, but I'll probably take the over because I'm sick and I just love Josh Allen. And, Green Bay's defense is not anything special in my eyes. They're going to be forced to play from behind. I know we saw, and he is mobile. I know he can move a little, but Josh Allen's not going to be running multiple in anytime soon.
That's not true. He's going to have 3 rushing touchdowns this week.
Just a hat trick. Just keep it. I wouldn't mind that in any form, but yeah, I mean, Benjamin, the price is just, God, if I make lineups where I'm really aggressive in other spots and I need a pure punt, he's the kind of guy I do think down here could find the end zone, maybe get a cheap, efficient game. Still don't feel confident about it. Of course, it's a lot of risk, but I think you could do worse.
Well, I think that if you're playing one of these super aggressive lineups, you're not concerned about floor whatsoever.
That's right.
So even if Benjamin catches a touchdown at $3,600, what's really his ceiling?
Well, I mean, you're hoping that, he takes the lion's share of targets they're playing from behind and he can catch, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 75 and a touchdown. That's like 20-ish.
I mean, he hasn't had more than 3 receptions in any game this season. He hasn't eclipsed 30 yards in any game this season.
These are bad. I will say this.
I get that, but wouldn't it be better? Would you be better off that instead of playing Benjamin at 36, paying 39 for Gabriel, knowing that could be 0, but if he does catch a touchdown, it's probably like a 70-yard touchdown.
I see the merit to that. I will say I think that Benjamin's ceiling is probably a little higher than you do, just because I really look at. It's only 3 games in. The first game I throw out completely because Peterman's not a real thing. And then last week was an anomaly in the sense that they didn't need to throw. So we really only have that game against the Chargers where he did find the end zone. And yeah, it was on 3 targets. That's not what I'm looking for in any form. But I think this will be a pretty telling week in the sense if it plays more traditional, say they just go generically behind and they force Allen to really throw it a little more, how that appeals. I do see what you're saying with Gabriel, and I will take that stance. But Kelvin Benjamin's probably one of the punts that I'll be looking to.
At quarterback, Aaron Rodgers comes in at number 1. If people want to get into the giveaway for $20 DK this week, give the episode a like, leave your DraftKings handle, and if you're playing a single entry team, what quarterback are you using? So Ben, in your single entry lineups, which quarterback do you think you'll be using? You are ineligible for the draw, by the way.
Oh, you're killing me. Which quarterback would I be using? You know who it's going to be? It's going to be the Red Rifle. Fire up Andy Dalton. 5,400 I think is pretty appealing to me. We talked about Gio. If AJ Green is all right, I think that's a pretty good spot.
How chalky do we think that Andy Dalton gets here? Because you can't find anyone who isn't infected with gingivitis in this spot.
That's what happens, man. I think that, and I can't believe I'm saying this, people will roll to Baker a little. That'll take the heat off. Still.
I think if it was me, I would roll up and just play Ryan Tannehill. I don't know which Dolphins receiver I want to play. Probably none of them. But I just think that's a nice spot for Tannehill.
If it was me and I'm looking for a one-off, and I've been doing this a little, I guess I'm just higher on him in general. I still don't mind Russell Wilson.
I like Wilson too. Russell Wilson's he's not as good as Cam, but he has the same upside as Cam. And if that's the case, and he still possesses that upside, he has game-breaking type potential on any slate.
I mean, when you have guys, those 2 in particular, that can rush like that, it's just a different outcome in terms of the ceilings because they can just do things that most of the other quarterbacks literally are ineligible to do. 5,600. the line is bad. The weapons aren't great, but man, I don't mind rolling the dice there.
So, but I mean, if you're going to play a single entry lineup, you would revert more to sort of like a cash game mentality to a point, right?
To a point. I think it's important to do, I know this kind of sounds like a hedge. It's important to do that, but at the same time, you have to be cognizant that everybody else is going to do that. So you can get better, nuanced, lower owned guys without being radical. Take the Millie. If you really wanted to be unique at quarterback, you're going to have to play someone extreme to get a sub 5%. When you're playing single entry, you don't have to be as extreme. You could go to a Tannehill, you could go to a Russell Wilson and probably get them at that similar ownership. And they're not nearly as crazy as playing Josh Allen or Trubisky or someone really out there.
I think that Josh Allen outscores Baker Mayfield this week, but that's me. I don't think that Baker's going to, I know he has the rushing capabilities, but I just don't think that he's going to need to run against Oakland, where I think just Josh Allen just runs for his life most of the time.
I mean, yeah, obviously I'm going to take Josh Allen in those matchups. I'm not overly high on Baker this week. I'm taking a wait and see. I just think that, yes, that was a cool thing. He came in, he ruined my Jets. What can you do? We'll see how he plays on the road here. They're game planning for him, of course. There's other options that are not, if there was a big price difference, but I'll pay the $300 and go get Dalton or even Luck, who I don't really like, but at the same time, I don't hate that spot at home.
So I think, too, in single entry formats, instead of just playing someone who is completely unowned, because like you mentioned, that the ownership isn't going to be quite, or it might be as concentrated, and you might see higher ownerships on some of the chalkier guys than you would in a tournament with $600,000 or 600,000 entries into it, that the best pivot moves and contrarian plays you can make in single entries are pivoting from like one elite player to another, instead of from a guy who's good to a guy who's bad.
That's right. You don't have to do that because everyone concentrates. They only have one bullet. They tend to just say, well, I don't want to fade that super obvious guy. So you can take, and that's a really good point. It's well said. You can take pivots off of guys, not to just these ridiculous plays, to other guys maybe in a less optimal spot, but who are still really talented and will garner ownership in different formats.
Like, for example, this week, if everyone's like super in on Beckham at wide receiver, that you just sacrifice the $300 and play Hopkins instead. Like, that would be a more logical pivot than being like, I'm not using Andy Dalton, I'm going to use Sam Darnold.
Yeah, there you go. Because, again, in one, when you're building a portfolio, you're going to have a little Hopkins, you're going to have a little Julio. With one lineup, most people are going to be like, well, I love this Giants game. I need Julio there. So the only way to do that, but yeah, you don't want to be going, oh, well, let me take Albert Wilson. I'm making my stand with the Dolphins. Like, that's a little extreme. You don't have to do that in single entry. You want to be somewhat vanilla, but you need to add, you can't be overly, and that's what people end up doing. They rake themselves. That's a mistake, but you don't need to get extreme at the same point.
Dalton is probably the best play from sub $6,000, or at least the highest floor play. I like Tannehill in sort of the sense, as Sealy always says, don't buy the steak, just buy the cow. Just buy the guy who's going to be throwing it around to everyone, because it's going to be hard to, is it going to be Jakeem the Dream? Is he going to end up with 2 touchdowns? Is Albert Wilson going to be the guy? Is this going to be a Devontae Parker week? Is AJ Derby going to catch a touchdown? Like, I don't know. But I know that Ryan Tannehill is going to be throwing against this Patriots defense, and the Patriots should score points. So logically, that makes some sense to me if that's the pivot that you'd want to make. Because listen, we've seen Andy Dalton in chalk spots before. It doesn't always work out.
No, I mean, I've been picking on the Falcons defense, and that's something I'm kind of continuing to do. It's more to do with them than it is Andy Dalton. You're right about that. Tannehill scares me a little. If he can keep throwing these little midget pop passes and have Jakeem Grant run 90 yards every play, he'll be fine. But game script should be good. I as much as I would love to see the Patriots dead and buried, I don't think they are. So yeah, there are options. I mean, pricing for quarterbacks in general is really flat these days. I mean, we don't have a guy above 6,800. That's kind of crazy. So you're not paying. It's kind of everyone is bunched up.
So at the top, you mentioned that, because Rodgers is the most expensive, then it's Brady, then it's Breeze, Rivers, Deshaun Watson, Fitzpatrick, Matt Ryan. Those are your plus $6,000 quarterbacks. And you mentioned that you're paying up at running back. I think a lot of people will do that based on the uncertain nature of everyone below $5,000 at that position. So quarterback seems like a super easy way to save money. We talked about this Texans-Colts game a little bit. Like, do you think anyone's going to have like a Watson? Because Bruce Ellington's injured, and I know that doesn't seem like much, but just take another body off the field. It concentrates market share a little bit more. Fuller, Hopkins, and Watson. Just run that out as a stack and like bring it back with T.Y. Hilton or potentially Naheem Hines, whoever, and just go crazy that way.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with that. I don't think it'll be popular, but it'll also be not non-existent. People will do that. Deshaun Watson, even though he hasn't been great, he scores better than he really plays. And if it wasn't for Matt Ryan's just absurd games and Breeze too, kind of, they masked some good, Cam is on a bye, but Cam, Deshaun Watson, there's been a couple others who have gotten the job done at quarterback. They've just been a little overshadowed by these monster games.
Yeah, especially with Mahomes off this slate, people are just like, oh man, I can't just
Thank
lock in
God.
Mahomes anymore. I don't know what to do at quarterback. But is this a situation where Tom Brady says, fuck this, I'm throwing 6 touchdowns?
There's always that. I caught the real reason I should have disclosed this earlier. The real reason I won in week 3 was because the Patriots were off the main slate, and I just don't have to deal with the Tom Brady fiasco. I never know what to do with him. I really don't like the Patriots in life. I'm probably going to have, we talked about Hogan, like him, Hogan, and Gronk. And then I don't know who you even run it back with, but you can make some interesting Patriots stacks that normally would garner a ton of ownership in a spot like this that maybe people sour on because of just, how bad they looked against the Lions.
Well, let's talk tight ends then. Gronk, obviously the most expensive, and him not being $6,900 probably affects his fantasy output. He's $7,000, and we know that he always scores touchdowns at 69, never at 7,000. Maybe not never,
Nice.
but not as often. Yeah, exactly, very nice. But what do we do with tight end? Like it's so devoid of any talent. Like if Jack Doyle sits again, play Ebron, I guess.
Yeah, I used Ebron in cash. I used him in some important lines last week, but for the most part, I didn't overly dive in. And I guess you could say he kind of caught a break. He had some looks in the red zone. He had a bunch of targets. He did salvage, which was somewhat lucky, but I do think that his price didn't really move. I'm probably going to be a little more heavily invested this time if Doyle sits. It's mostly because I probably need to get the savings. I would love to pay up to Ertz or Gronk. But yeah, Ebron. And then for me, I tried to jump on Jimmy Graham last week early. It did not work, but I think I'll probably go back. I think a big game is coming from him.
Yeah, Jimmy Graham sucks. Don't play Jimmy Graham.
I learned that last week. I don't understand. Didn't you think that Rodgers would look to him a little more?
No,
and he would just
Jimmy Graham is washed. That's why he's gonna have like 2 good games this year. Maybe you want to be on it. It's a lot like Jordy Nelson. Like Jordy Nelson is washed, but if you leave him completely open, then yeah, he can do something. And
yeah, we saw that last week too. Jordy Nelson is just dust. I'm with you there. This is so depressing. Is Jimmy Graham really just done?
I think so. He was done last year, except that he just kept using him over and over and over. It's not like he was putting up like 9 for 172 and 2 touchdowns. It was like 2 for 22 and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, he was finding that end zone.
I mean, when I look at it right now, I think maybe the best value on the board is OJ Howard.
Yeah, I mean, I'll put it like this. If I do attack the Bears defense, which is not something I'm looking to do, that's the kind of guy I want to do it with, where I don't have to allocate a ton of salary. He can rely. I'm not saying rely on a touchdown, but he doesn't need that much to get there. And it's a one-off of Ebron, who will still definitely be popular. Not sure how much I really would do that. Benjamin Watson might garner some ownership for people looking to just get cheap value in probably the most stackable game. So those are interesting guys. I think OJ Howard will be lost in the shuffle for sure.
And he really shouldn't be. Like, he's averaging 4 targets a game. He's had over 50 yards in every single contest. He broke that one big one in week 2. But I just envision how this game goes. If it's going to be close, like, as much as people want to like talk Peyton Barber, they can't run the ball. So they're not going to run the ball. And if they're playing Fitzpatrick, they're not going to run the ball. He'll likely be their leading rusher if that's the case. But they blitz so often and bring Mac up to the line of scrimmage and try to get him in the backfield that it does seem like there would be space just between like 5 and 15 yards over the middle. And I feel like that's where O.J. Howard might have to be. The only drawback is if Chicago is generating a ferocious pass rush or they're blitzing often, that O.J. Howard's such a good blocker that they keep him back in to keep Fitz upright.
And it's absolutely true. He is a really good blocking tight end. Would you go extreme to Cameron Brate, who
no, I wouldn't.
From the dead?
Yeah, he emerged from the dead, but how much did he really do?
No, he just caught a touch. I mean, he literally I was like, oh wow, I forgot about that guy when he scored the touchdown. It ended my showdown about 5 minutes in. But yeah, that's an interesting point because I do envision a scenario where maybe they do keep O.J. Howard more to keep Fitzpatrick upright, and that may limit the appeal. I still don't mind the spot. He's getting enough volume where if they're down, he's probably going to be running routes, and Brate doesn't scare me that much.
Well, the three lowest teams per DVOA against tight end so far this season have been Houston, KC, who's not on this slate, in San Francisco. We didn't really talk Mike Williams, but he's sort of like the de facto tight end for the Chargers right now. I know it doesn't really help you at the tight end position, but with Houston, I think that's just more of a case for Ebron. I would, as crazy as it sounds, I might prefer that Jack Doyle comes back because then I think people won't use Ebron, but I think Doyle just might be banged up, and even if he plays, he might not be effective in any sort of capacity. That it'll get people off of Ebron, but Ebron might still end up being the guy.
That would be sneaky. That is something you can do. That's all about risk tolerance. Like if Doyle comes back and we don't know the situation, we've seen time and time again in the NFL decoys, guys who come back and they play, limited snaps. Right now, Ebron's going to be a guy I'm going to use in cash, and I think I'm going to be heavier than I was last week just because luck, not just because of the Hail Mary, but clearly it looks like he's checking down a little more. The arm strength is suspect at best, and Ebron's just going to see the targets at 3,600. It's hard not to take that savings.
Yeah. Any other tight ends from people are talking about Mark Andrews again? Do you have any interest?
They have so many. There's too many tight ends in the Ravens. They all need to go. I like Mark Andrews as a player. I just don't think it's a team that I'm overly sold on. It seems unnecessary. I think tight end I keep pretty vanilla this week.
I guess the way to go, I think if I'm paying down, I'm paying for O.J. Howard. I'll continue to use David Njoku until he actually does something because I think that he's a part of this offense. And they're playing a bad defense, so that can only help. Maybe pay up for Gronk if I do play some Patriots stacks. We got some Patriots news here. And I don't know. That's it. Maybe I'll test out Trey Burton just because Tampa's defense sucks.
Yeah, they do look to him. It's just hard. I've had some Trey Burton just because they've been on awkward slates. Trubisky, I'm not a huge fan. He seems to miss guys. Allen Robinson takes a bunch of the targets. So Trey Burton's always live to find that end zone. Same with Eifert, for that matter. Those are guys that if the salary falls right and I don't want to play Ebron, maybe I look to here and there, but not overly high on either of them.
All right, so we do have some breaking news here, if you didn't know. So Rex Burkhead is being placed on IR by the Patriots. So he will not play in week 4.
Certainly not.
So what does that do to the Patriots backfield? Does that make you, throwing that out of the mix, knowing that Kenyon Barner is going to be in, but it's going to be primarily Sony Michel and James White, would that put you on any of the Patriots running backs, or is it still just play James White or don't play anyone?
I'm close. Sony Michel's a guy that it certainly is a boost up, but what you have to weigh is, with the Patriots especially, is the ownership bump, because everyone's going to see this news, worth what role he may or may not have.
Well, but is there an ownership bump knowing that, people are going to see this news, but people knew that Rex Burkhead was banged up anyway, that they weren't going to play Sony Michel because they watched him on Sunday night? Do you think that's enough to get people back on him?
I think it'll help that it broke kind of at a different time, to be honest. People see it late, they adjust. I think that is a factor. I'm not saying he's going to be chalk or anything. I had some interest in Brady, Hogan, Gronk, James White, here and there. That's going to continue. I think it solidifies a little of that. And to me, it's not that big of news in the sense that I still think they'll be fine. Burkhead, he was a part, but they have so many guys. It's the Patriots next man up style. So I'm not sure. Sony Michel is the one guy that I think is still unknown for what I want to do.
In terms of season long, just to throw this off course just a little bit, would you rather own White or Sony Michel the rest of the season? Because I think I'd just stick with James White.
Yeah, I would too. He's just ingrained in that offense. He finds the end zone. I still think, even with this news, that there is a real chance that Sony Michel doesn't have that big of a role going forward.
Do you think the Patriots just end up finding someone else and just say, hey, you're now the guy, and we're going to stick with the game plan that we have?
I think that's entirely possible. Obviously, it's not going to be immediately, but the Patriots they're not like a normal team, and they do things like that. James White is one of the few that I always have felt comfortable with in the running back spot for them.
Do you think this affects the receiving game at all? Because Rex Burkhead had been running a lot of wheel routes. He'd been lining up out of the slot a little bit. He's been getting some end zone targets that Brady was constantly overthrowing him on, just by that much. Then Rex would have had some nice weeks. But with Gordon, we're unsure of. Hogan been slipping, and we both like Hogan this week as a potential pivot play at low ownership. And with teams just focusing on taking out Gronk, like Detroit was triple covering him at some point. We got Edelman coming back next week. Like, if you had to own one of the Patriots wide receivers the rest of the season on a season-long team, which one would it be, do you think? Edelman?
Yeah, it would be Edelman. He's another one where it's kind of similar to James White to me. The Patriots are always somewhat unknown, but I feel pretty damn comfortable. Edelman's going to assume the Edelman role, the Wes Welker, the Amendola role. Like, that's just what they want to do. I still think that's the bread and butter of that offense. So Hogan will have better games than we've seen, but I still don't trust him as much as I trust a guy like Edelman.
All right, so if I set the over-under of exposure on Sony Michel for you in Week 4 on DraftKings at 15%, you going over, you going under?
In my head, I was thinking around 10%, so I think I'd probably come in slightly under.
Because it is that range that we talked about a little bit earlier that you just don't really know who to play. You got like Lynch, you got Chris Carson. If Shady sits, then you got Chris Ivory. Now you have Sony Michel, or you have those like potential pass catchers in the $3,000 range that maybe you're right. Maybe people will gravitate towards him because of this news.
I do think he will get a somewhat of a viable ownership bump. And it's a range in general I don't want to go to that much. So I'm hoping that I find ways to stay with the Geos of the world and kind of feel more comfortable.
Last tight end I did want to bring up, Rhett Ellison. Because if everyone's going to be on Sterling Shepard and Evan Ingram is out, like Ellison did catch a touchdown last week, and he comes in at, what is he here? He is $2,700. Like, I'm more apt to play touchdown or bust at tight end than I am at like a low end receiver, just because so few tight ends actually do anything, and it's such an unpredictable position. But if this game is going to be a shootout, it has the highest game total of the week, that why not take the flyer there if you're going to take one?
I think people will do that. Again, because the game stack is going to be super viable and he's cheap. He caught a touchdown. For me, I would rather, as much as it pains me to pay $200 to get Hooper or Ricky Seals-Jones, who I never get right, I don't mind going to those two. I think you're better off doing that. Ellison, he caught the touchdown, but he's more of a blocking guy in general, and I don't think the ownership's going to be non-existent just because of the appeal of the game as a whole.
Defenses, before we get into our favorite stacks of the week, Jacksonville comes in at the very top. They're above $4,000 playing the Jets. The Chargers are at $39,000. The Packers are playing Josh Allen, so they're $3,500. Eagles, Seahawks. Any of those five defenses crack your lineups, because now you're paying up at defense and you're paying up at running back, and you got to save money somewhere.
The Jaguars in lineups where maybe I do dip into the Sony Michel range. I get it. I think that they're very impressive. They score all the time. Darnold, it sets up perfectly for them. The only thing that's a negative is the price. So if I could afford it, I would go all the way to the top.
Who is it below that threshold that you like? Like I talked about the Colts a little bit. They come in at $2,100? $2,200. Sorry. I think that you can play the offensive pieces of the Texans and the Colts defense just because they're going to generate so much pressure that Deshaun Watson can score 35 points in a 3-touchdown, 2-pick fumble getting sacked 6 times a game. I think that the floor is high enough for the Colts defense that I'm not really too concerned about the amount of points that get scored against them. And their defense actually has been pretty good this year. And if they can put down Wentz 5 times like they did last week, they're going to get to Watson at least 4 times.
Yeah, they've been more impressive than I certainly thought. That was a team I tried to pick on, and it didn't really work. The team for me is going to be, I expect them to be very popular. It's the Bears at home, Fitzpatrick or Jameis. I think it's Fitzpatrick at this point, but going to get pressure, turnover machine. They've already been super impressive. The only thing that's a negative is they're going to be wildly popular. So in big field tournaments, I'll probably throw out a flyer here or there, maybe on some of these lesser owned defenses, hopefully at home, like the Colts, similar to that. And you're right. It's not, a lot of people think that it's about points allowed. It's not. It's about pressure. And you're just looking for defenses who have opportunities to make big plays. You can get there even if the team gets somewhat gashed.
Yeah, like you're better off playing a game, like you're better off playing a defense or special teams against a quarterback that runs a high pace of play who throws a lot, rather than just an offense that isn't very good. Like maybe Arizona opens it up a little bit more with Josh Rosen this week and they throw a lot. Maybe Seattle's defense becomes viable, but generally speaking, and it's even like Miami last week, they just don't run enough plays to give you that sort of upside that you want out of a fantasy defense. I keep kind of going back to the point, like 13 points is great for a defense. Like you would take that every week, but if you paid up for the Rams that week, they played Arizona. They shut out the Cardinals and scored 13 DraftKings points.
Yeah, that's obviously as good as you can do in terms of points allowed. You're just looking for the crazy, strip fumble, touchdowns, just pressure. It's not too, I'm glad Mahomes isn't on this slate, so I didn't have to talk about him. But he is the type of guy, I know he's been unbelievable, that I like to target defenses against. High octane offenses, not that have been that successful, but you want guys who are slinging it all around. Deshaun Watson certainly fits that bill. I may take a stab on the Raiders defense just because of Baker. Not the greatest spot. That's a one-off, but the Bears fit the mold to me, clearly.
The other one that I would turn to, that if I really wanted to take a gamble on this, Tennessee's defense at home against the Eagles. Like I mentioned, the Colts got to Wentz 5 times last week, brought him down 5 times in that matchup. Tennessee has a superior pass rush to Indianapolis, and maybe things are just starting to click. It seems like a really sloggy type game. And maybe we don't get the sort of pace that we want to see, but it does seem like, and especially if Ajayi is dealing with a back injury and we don't know how close he is to 100%, that it might be a situation where the Eagles kind of look crummy like they did last week. And if that's the case, I think Tennessee can get to them.
No problem. I mean, unless I get up to Jacksonville, who I think is just in a really good spot, I'm going to try to save within reason as much as possible, because I don't see that much difference between a defense like the Colts or the Titans and say someone like, New England, Green Bay. Like, yeah, they're in a slightly better spot, of course, but I'll take the valuable $1,200 difference.
Let's talk the big stacks of the week. I kind of tipped my hand a little bit. I just really like this Houston-Indy game. Indy is running the most plays per just second of any team in the league right now. They're running the fastest pace, the third fastest paced team, almost regardless of game situation, is Houston. They haven't had a lead yet this year, so maybe that has a lot to do with it. But it's just going to be a fast game. It's indoors, on a track, 2 quarterbacks that are going to throw a lot. Like, neither one of these run games is overly good. The defenses are kind of solid, but not great by any stretch of the imagination. I think there could be big plays in this game. I think both quarterbacks are viable. I prefer the stack offensively with the Texans because I think it's more concentrated in that regard, but you can bring back Hilton, you can bring back Grant if you wanted to. If Doyle sits, you can just play Ebron either way if you wanted. Naheem Hines is a cheap piece. And both defenses, I think, are viable in this matchup because, like I mentioned, it's just going to be a lot of passing a lot of the time. Neither offensive line is very good. That I just think this could be a points galore type game.
I have no problem with that. I do see the appeal. It's in the dome, can get up and down, and there's cheap pieces, which is, stacks are one thing, but it is tricky, and I know the Saints make it work. But when you're allocating $25,000 for 3 players, sometimes that's brutal. You really needed to get up and down. So I'm with you in that game. Obviously, the Giants game is going to be popular, and I'll throw in the Dalton, the Falcons game. I think that another one inside, pretty appealing game. I don't think everyone will be on it, and there's pieces on both teams that I think you can use.
Well, do you prefer Tyler Boyd more if AJ Green plays or sits?
Plays. I was on him last week. That worked out great, but this is a situation where I don't, if he is playing that number one receiver role, he looked very good, but I would actually like him to play second fiddle. The targets are still there. Even though that's a team I don't mind targeting. I kind of like AJ Green if he plays.
I don't know if I like AJ Green if he plays. I just really worry about that groin injury.
Yeah, it's scary. We'll have to wait and see on how he is. But if he's good to go, I can tell you right now, I'm definitely going to have some exposure to him with Dalton and Gio and try to mix it up like that.
So my favorite game stacks of the week, just pure game stack. I like that not Tennessee. I do not like that game as a game stack. I think
don't do that.
I think that's like that reeks of like 17-14 for whoever. But Houston, Indianapolis, I really like. You mentioned that Atlanta and Cincinnati game. I like both running backs in that game, and more so obviously if Devonta Freeman ends up sitting. But can you see that New Orleans Giants game? Like there's something off about that game to me. Like I can't quite peg what it is. But we could get like it's the first time the Saints have been outdoors all season. Like they're only 3-point favorites in that game, and it really feels like they're 80 times better than the Giants. So that's kind of bizarre. Do we see more of a game this week with them in New York like we saw week 2 when they played the Browns?
It does feel like a trap. I'm not super high on the Saints in general. Not that I predicted this kind of start. Certainly not. I think it gets moving. The problem for me is just stack. I'll put it like this. When I look to a game to stack, it's not just do I think it will be high scoring. It's the opportunity cost of paying specific salaries. And with the Saints, they're so polarizing because they use 2 guys. I mean, they have the highest priced receiver and running back. It makes it tougher. So I'm with you. In terms of stackability, that's not my favorite game. I obviously will try to get up to those guys if I can afford it. But I have a tough time pairing like Brees Kamara, Michael Thomas, Sterling Shepard. I don't know how viable that is.
So I guess the other teams you can look to stack just because of the implied team totals that they have. The Packers are ones that just no one's really kind of all in on, although they're the biggest favorites on the slate. They're at home and they should score a ton of points. The Chargers are the other one. Like those two are the 2 biggest favorites. Maybe that makes things awkward depending on, and there's so many guys on those teams that they're not super expensive, at least to the point of where the Saints are at, but there are more guys to choose from, so you give yourself a larger spread to get it wrong.
Yeah, you don't have salary as concentrated like a team like the Chargers. There's a ton of weapons. You mentioned Mike Williams when we were talking tight ends, even though he's a wide receiver, they do use him like that. And that complicates it. We'll see if Benjamin plays. I don't think he's going to be a factor anyway, but Keenan Allen, those are the type of teams though. They have a huge team total. The spread makes it tough to run someone back sometimes, but I think that that's kind of an appealing spot. You can load up and maybe not get that ownership that some of these other teams will garner.
If you had to pick one and you were forced to choose between stacking the Packers offense or stacking the Chargers offense, which one would you go to?
I would go to the Chargers offense.
I think I would go to the Packers offense solely because they just refuse to run the ball. That I know if Rodgers is throwing a touchdown, he's going to throw it to one of the receivers.
That's true. The thing I like about the Chargers is that Gordon is involved in the passing game, so you can pair up Rivers, Gordon, and a receiver. I feel pretty comfortable doing that.
All right. Ben Rasa, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's nice to be on here for NFL. Change of pace, always a fun time.
Yeah, well, I think most people would know you on the show from every single golf major and the players that we did all season long. And maybe we'll, if you're up to it, when we get deeper into the swing season for golf, now that golf has taken 1 week off, that we'll get you back on for swing season golf, DK style.
Yeah. Once I learn who these Webbies are, I'll come on and we'll talk some lesser known golfers.
Yeah, and if you're getting a golf itch right now, myself and Jeff Feinberg made our picks for the Ryder Cup, preview the entire tournament. That is up right now on my podcast feed and the DraftKings YouTube page. Ben, let us know what's going on at awesemo.com. And if people use the promo code PME, you can go check that out for yourself. But let us know the highlights.
So we got everything in full swing. You know, NFL is here. We got ownerships. We got the projections. We have Awesomo's rankings. We brought over the Slack chat from FanVice, of course, which is my favorite thing. Community there talking all the sports. I have a show with Andrew Barron every day called From A to B. It's on at 2:30. You can check that out. Just a lot of content. So stop on by, check it out. I think you guys would really enjoy it.
Give me a Ryder Cup pick before you go.
Even though
just a straight up winner. Just which team wins?
Europe.
Europe for me too. Boom. Let's do this. Let's go Team Europe.
It hurts me as an American saying that, but yeah, I think Europe holds serve on their home turf.
Yeah, they rarely lose at home. All right, I'm the PME. Or actually, I'm Pat Mayo. This was the PME. You can follow me on Twitter at the PME. Same as Facebook, same as Instagram. The running feed in chronological order of all my content for the week will be on the Facebook page. It's actually the easiest way to track it because there's no extra commentary going around. If you want to get in the draw for $20 DK, check out the comment section after giving the episode a like. Leave your DraftKings handle and who you would build around at quarterback in a single entry lineup this week. I'll be back on Thursday, Friday, and live Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Myself, The Cust, and Gary and Thorne taking your questions, updating the rankings and all the injury situations. And there seems to be a lot, at least at running back this week. So check us out there. Come by, say hi, give the episode a like. You can move on. You don't need to watch. But it'll be on demand on the audio feed at like 11:32. If you just wake up a little bit later, all the info will be there for you. All right? I'm Pat Mayo. Check out the cheat sheet on DKPlaybook.com. Good luck on DraftKings in Week 4. Someone go win $1 million. Only $10 to enter this week. All right? I'll see you next time.
Mayo Experience! Experience!